Wow, new angle. The splash looks very cool. Looks very cool for those who are watching on YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, here is your TGIF Friday poll question. If peace holds in the Middle East, should President Trump receive a Nobel Prize next year? By the way, this is the way that I worded it last night, and I put it into our internal communication system, Slack, with a note to Maya, our newsletter editor. And I said, Maya, here is the Friday poll question. If by chance President Trump is the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize tomorrow, meaning this morning, actually 5 a.m. today on this Friday Eastern time, obviously we've got to retool. My point is, I didn't expect he was going to be the recipient. Frankly, I don't expect he'll be the recipient next year, but I do think he ought to be the recipient next year if the peace holds. In fact, maybe even if the peace does not hold. I have a public service announcement for everyone listening to this podcast and for those who are watching on YouTube. Do not buy a pretzel baked in Philadelphia on this day. Do not order a cheesesteak that comes from Philadelphia on this day. In the same way that we used to say about Detroit, don't buy a car on a Monday, made on a Monday, because if it were made on a Monday, people are hungover who made it. And if you bought a car made on a Friday, has nobody ever heard this except me? Then the people who were manufacturing your car, old school Detroit, they were looking forward to their weekend. So you're better served if you have a American-made car that was made on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Why do I say this? For obvious reasons. What a devastating night for Philadelphia sports fans. Holy smokes. I'm reading the MLB account, and I watched it in real time. Very exciting, but disappointing. Bases loaded, 2 outs in the 11th. LA center fielder Andy Page is at the plate, looking to propel his team forward in its title defense. Philadelphia reliever Orion Kerkering on the mound, trying to keep his team's season alive. Pages broke his bat on a grounder to the mound. Kerkering bobbled it. And just like that, everything sped up. Hyun-Sung Kim, pinch hitting at third base, broke for home. Kerkering retrieved the ball, looked around wildly. Catcher JT Realmuto pointed toward first base, then had to lunge to his left as Kerkering made a snap decision to go for the out at the plate, and thus ended the Fightin's season in LA last night. And then, like a lot of people, I'm sure, I have the remote in my hand, and the second it ends, I'm like, okay, let's watch some football. Philadelphia was, New York blue in the Meadowlands. Bottom line, the Birds suffered a shocking 34-17 defeat at the hands of New York. And if that's not enough, Philadelphia hockey lost as well. However, there's always a way for you to win, even if your teams, plural, do not win. And that's with my friends at the Bet Parks and Play Gun Lake online apps. Your favorite casino games right on your phone. Get some skin in all the games. Even though my teams lost, there were ways for me to win. Can I sit here in all honesty and say, and last night, that's what I did? No, I was a total homer with all of my wagering last night. You don't even want to know. New casino users get up to $1,000 casino bonus back if you're down in the first 24 hours. BetParks.com, PlayGunLake.com. You got to be 21. And in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or Michigan, gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Yesterday, Thursday, results in the Smerconish.com daily poll question, 30,687. I'm not surprised that it wasn't higher because it required a little bit of thought, a little deliberation, a little understanding of what I was really saying. Will President Trump's deployment of National Guard troops spur the sort of violence that would justify continued military presence? And what I'm really saying in that question, and by the way, 55.62% said no, and I hope they're right, that this violence will not come. But what I was saying is that I believe he lacks the legal justification for troop deployment. I don't think that he has the legal justification, and ultimately we'll find out from the Supreme Court of the United States, to do what he is doing. That's obviously not stopping him. There's a good in the newsletter today, in the Friday newsletter. Please be a subscriber. It's free. It's worthy. There's an NBC analysis as to Trump's contemplation of invoking the Insurrection Act. I don't believe that there's a justification. There's not an insurrection underway today. But it occurs to me as I watch the events in Portland and more recently in Chicago that if there's a violent reaction to Trump sending in the National Guard, then there would be the predicate circumstance to warrant the National Guard. Now, do I believe, and many of you are telling me this in social media posts, do I believe that this is all part of the cabal? Hey, I'll send in the troops. People will be angry. They'll revolt. Then I'll have legal justice. No, I don't think he's playing three-dimensional chess here. Nor, by the way, do I believe that he's setting the stage so the troops can be in all of these cities for election. I don't see that either. Pray that I'm right. So that's yesterday's poll result, 55% and change no to the question of, is this deployment going to create, spur, motivate the type of violence that could warrant the continued positioning of the Guard? With regard to the Friday poll question, I have three things to say to you. Maria Corina Machado. Maria Corina Machado. I was watching at 5 a.m. This I've never done. I mean, 5 a.m. is nothing for me. I get up awfully early. You know that. But this I've never done. I've never dialed in on my phone the Nobel announcement, but I did today to see, who's going to win the prize. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado won the Nobel Prize on Friday, winning recognition as a woman, quote, who keeps the flame of democracy burning amid a growing darkness. Now, that last part of that statement, amid a growing darkness, sure, that applies to Venezuela. But I'll discuss this on radio perhaps today, but I listened carefully and I couldn't help but think that the recognition of Machado was verbalized in a way that was a direct repudiation of Trump without ever mentioning his name. There was then a Q&A of Jorgen Watne Friedness, the chair of the committee. I'm probably butchering his name with no intended disrespect. And one of the questions was about Trump. And the answer was, we don't never pay attention to any campaigns for a particular recipient. But I have to get a transcript. I've got to get a transcript of the announcement of Machado, because I thought that there were some subtle rebukes of Trump in the explanation of why she was going to be the victor. He was never going to win the Nobel Peace Prize this year. The only way that you could say, well, yeah, he could win it this year, because after all, Obama won it and he was 8 or 9 months into his term and he really hadn't accomplished anything. If they gave it to Obama, why not give it to Trump? But the deadline had passed. The nomination deadline for this year's prize was January 31. That was 11 days after Trump was sworn in for his second term. So, there you go. By definition, you could certainly make the case that he's deserving of it now because of the peace agreement, the ceasefire, the 20-point agreement relative to Israel and Gaza. But I'm not seeing enough attention paid to that fact. The deadline was January 31. That was 11 days after he was sworn in for a second term. The deal came too late. And the additional reason is that there's an inherent bias on that committee against Donald Trump. And why do I say that? I say that because of a guest that we had on radio a couple of weeks ago. I did a segment, I'm fond of doing segments for dummies, and I'm the dummy in chief, which means tell me the basics. And in this case, we went through the basics of the Nobel Prize. And the guest that I had, and I'll go into this in more detail on radio and play some of the clips, was very knowledgeable about the machinations of the committee, not on the committee himself. But I thought, this guy is wired. He's dialed in. And he's so clearly biased and telling us so against Trump on character. And the conversation that I had with him was, I've read Alfred Nobel's criteria, and character is not there. I mean, by the definition of Alfred Nobel, you could have a bad actor who does something miraculous for peace and ought to get it. The committee says the award goes to the person or organization that has done the most, quote, for fraternity between the nations and the abolition or reduction of standing armies and the formation and spreading of peace congresses. 1895, it was Swedish inventor and businessman Alfred Nobel who declared his fortune should be divided into 5 parts to honor outstanding achievements in physics, chemistry, physiology, or medicine, literature, and work in peace. Thousands of people choose to nominate a person or organization as a candidate for the prize, though you cannot nominate yourself. Those eligible to nominate a candidate include members of national governments, officials with international peace organizations, university professors, and former recipients. The recipients of 4 of the prizes are decided by a Swedish committee. The recipient of the Peace Prize is decided by a Norwegian committee composed of 5 members appointed by the Norwegian Parliament. And our radio guest, whose name I had difficulty pronouncing, and still have difficulty pronouncing, even though I'm looking at a spell guide for it, was the one who convinced me. University of Agder professor Øyvind Tonesen, a former advisor to the Nobel Institute. And he and I, in a nice and civil way, went round and round as to the role of character. So I am not alone in thinking that President Trump is worthy of such consideration. And what's most interesting are those who are agreeing with me. Sure, they're, you can watch on Fox the disappointment today that Trump is not getting the Nobel Prize. But how about the Washington Post editorial page? Quote, what seems different this time is Trump's, meaning a lot of people have tried to broker peace in the Middle East. What seems different this time is Trump's personal involvement. He brought an unorthodox negotiating style and relied on a few trusted advisors, his gut instinct, and an abiding belief in the power of personal relationships. That combination has brought other successes like the Abraham Accords in his first term and a commitment of Europeans to spend more on their own defense. And not only do you hear that from the Washington Post, but Thomas Friedman, who's going to be a guest of mine on CNN tomorrow, Friedman, who I trust and rely on for his analysis of Israel and the Middle East writ large. Headline, give Trump the Nobel for Gaza if he does the harder parts to come, which kind of tells you everything that you need to know. But the way that it begins is, I hope that if the first stage of this Gaza ceasefire, hostage release, and prisoner exchange comes off as planned in the next few days, that President Trump is showered with praise for 3 reasons that could impact the future of both the Middle East and America. And then he makes his whole case and says, look, this is monumental, and Trump is deserving of credit. And I'm the first, says Friedman, to believe that he ought to get the Nobel Peace Prize if he can do the heavy lifting that is still to come. Here's the way that he concludes. I like this line. Netanyahu played into Trump's hands by putting himself entirely in Trump's hands. Good line. And then final paragraph from Friedman. As I said, just stopping this terrible Gaza war, if it holds, is worthy of praise and the stuff of wonderful headlines. But seeing this whole plan through would be the stuff of history and Nobel Prizes. And getting Trump to realize what made him effective in the Middle East, governing by addition, not division, would actually make him so much better a president at home. That would be the stuff of miracles. And what Friedman argues is that Trump ought to be the same person at home that he's tried to be in the Middle East. Get everybody in the room in Camp David right now and get beyond this government shutdown. Love that line of thinking. Love that line of thinking. So anyway, today's poll question at smirconish.com is the question of the day. And I totally anticipated that he wouldn't get it, but that I'd push it off to next year. Who the hell knows what's going to happen in the span of the next 12 months? I'm sure there'll be other hot spots and other reasons that President Trump will think himself worthy. But in this instance, if peace holds in the Middle East, should President Trump receive a Nobel Prize next year? I am a yes vote. Yes, if this deal sticks together, give him the prize. And many, I'm sure, are going to go vote and say no just because they know it's something he desperately wants. Gang, if you're watching on YouTube, I thank you. If you're listening to the podcast without watching, hey, why not watch on YouTube? Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and know this, Sunday 10 a.m., dropping here on YouTube, episode 4 of the Mingle Project, Self-Sorting, great guest, David Wasserman from the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter. And in today's newsletter is the trailer. So you can get a taste of episode 4. It's not a long episode, but it's a worthy episode. And you know what I'm doing? Like, we dropped the pilot, the need to reestablish common experience. And now I'm going chapter by chapter into the component parts of our fragmentation and society disconnect. And believe me, we will get to prescriptions. We already did with Todd Bernstein in episode 1, but I'll be spending more time talking about what we need to do about it. But I first need to flesh out the problem. And one last thing, speaking of the newsletter, guess who gets the purple box treatment? Actually, kind of appropriate because purple is a color associated with royalty. But the purple box treatment in today's newsletter, meaning that they've generated a story about mingling. Princess Kate, co-authors an essay that is in today's newsletter. And the really cool part for me is that Robert Waldinger is credited as her co-author. It's Waldinger and Schultz who co-authored the book, The Good Life. So it's kind of funny for me because I've been so, on this crusade of talking about the good life, meaning socialization is actually good for your physical and mental health. And I always point to the Waldinger and Schultz book, which is the book that recaps this longitudinal study at Harvard where they've been following select individuals and their descendants for many, many years. And they found those who are most socially fit at 50 live the longest and the happiest. And Kate Middleton writes about this. I know, I'm like giddy. It's just like Kate is a mingler. And you know what? I got to say, William, I love the work that William does on mental health. I'm like total team Kate and William. Hey, Megan, where's your mingling essay? If you write, or if Harry writes a mingling essay, I would be so honored to put it in the smirconish.com daily newsletter. All right. See you, gang. See you. If you're in Philly, we'll get over it. It was brutal. That was brutal. Sunday, 10 a.m. YouTube here. Sunday at a new time. See ya.